Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's special guest is Deb Curtis. She goes by JoJo, and we'll find out more about that in a bit. She is a founder of SBA Business Acquisition Lending as a consultant, which is going to bring up some interesting conversation, I'm sure. She's a founding member of the Outlier Project, which is a unique private membership community for people who believe that anyone can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. She's a partner of HR for You, Inc., and they are on a mission to remove roadblocks that prevent people from finding living wage employment. She's also a member of C-Suite for Christ and a Trailblazer member for the Mom Link. Deb, glad to have you here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. It's a pleasure, Zen. I look forward to this time, and I hope your loyal listeners enjoy the journey here for the next hour.
I'm sure they will. So let's get started. And, we were talking about pre-show of, the difference between the outer and the inner lives, and that we don't talk about the inner lives very much. And even though it's half of our existence, at least, if not more sometimes.
Yeah.
And, we all experience it differently. We connect with an inner life early on in life through our experiences in nature with others. Sometimes it happens as a teen, sometimes not until midlife, when we go through the midlife crisis or empty nesting or some of those kinds of things. And I had a psychiatrist one time say, most people don't go through the spiritual awakening till their mid-40s, if they ever do. And I found that rather interesting until I got into my 40s. I was 18 at the time, having experienced my own. And I realized, oh yeah, this makes sense. There's that gap in the fulfillment of childhood obligations or children obligations and raising a family mid-career. You're getting to a place where it might fit, or you might realize, oh, I've been doing the same thing for a while and it just doesn't feel good. So what do you do with that? You begin to go inside and explore. So in that, where did you first get in touch with the inner side of life for you, and what was it like? Were others supportive of it, or did they kind of look at you with a raised eyebrow?
Yeah. The power of there's something greater than us was always the question I would have when I was younger. And I'll tell you, it started when, as a young girl, my mom, we would go to a Catholic church, and I was just really young. I might have been, I'm going to guess 6, 7 years old. And she always wanted to sit in the front pew. And my goodness, then, if we didn't get to church early enough and sit in the front pew for church that Sunday morning, it was going to be an ugly day at the house. Oh yeah. So that was kind of my initial experience of, God, and that there's something greater than us, but it just didn't make sense to me. That how can there be something greater? And if we don't get the front pew of the church, it's going to be an ugly day. It just didn't ring a bell.
Well,
So,
it said something for commitment, right?
There you go. It's so true. But boy, good Lord, if we didn't get that front pew. And I do remember Catholic masses. I still remember the incense smell. I attended many Catholic funerals throughout my life, and they can be long, right? Just like the weddings. So it was a great experience. And that's kind of where I learned that there is a God and a higher power. But I wasn't quite there yet, as far as they say you have a relationship. And
there's a lot of talk about that relationship, and
yeah,
really like, and it seems that there's this wanting to acquiesce to it, and yet so many distractions.
Right? Oh my. And who are those distractions? Where are they coming from? Who's directing them is the question. I was just having a conversation last night with a fellow friend, and talking about distractions and about Satan is really good at distracting and interfering with
Well, you know
Those of us,
something,
yeah.
since you brought up that word term, if you will, one of the things when I was in college, I was compelled to go down to the university library and look
Uh,
up that word to
okay.
see really where its origins were. And lo and behold, I found out something that just blew my mind and made perfect sense. The very first reference was the Greek thetan, Thetan. What's it
Okay.
mean? Thinker.
Really?
So to me, now a weird sense of humor, kind of, loose connection, loose association, if you will. I thought, wow, how perfect. They took that, disguised it, and created a fictitious enemy from it
Mm.
when it all
Mm.
has to do with us. There's
Yeah.
no outside influence on that. That's our choice to either be a good human or
Mm.
be less than we can be, in
Yeah.
my opinion. And that seemed to edify it. It really made,
Wow.
because I was steeped in church growing up too, right?
Hmm.
And there was still this, how do you really connect with all of this information, all of these, um, I don't want to say dogma, but that's the word that comes up to get us this prescriptive method of achieving connection, right?
Hmm.
That individual relationship that you mentioned. And it
Hmm.
just seems so distracting to get caught up in those prescriptive methodologies when it is that personal relationship that has to happen. And we're
Mm.
thinkers, so we can distract ourselves from it
Mm.
very easily.
Yeah. Very easily. Isn't that something?
Mhm.
I'm reading a book right now called The Gap and the Gain, and the gap is going down the wrong lane and the gain is going down the right lane. So it's kind
Mhm.
of the same path of thinking and the choices we make. Like sometimes I'll hear my husband, he does this a lot when he's frustrated about something. I'll hear him go, I just hear him like exhale.
Right,
I'm
right.
like, you're in the gap.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But it's true. And
Well, yeah, and it's interesting how you noticed that expression, right? It's subtle. There were no words. It was just an expression that let you know what was going on. And oftentimes, these are expressions that others make around us that we don't pay attention to, acknowledge, and or inquire of.
yeah, yeah. But it's an energy that comes out of him. So I immediately feel like, did I do something wrong? Or what happened? It's the little communication, right? So anyways, good. I'm glad you went to the library that day and looked it up, because that relationship, like you said, is a choice.
Mhm.
But which one are we going to choose?
Right. Well, and
Yeah.
one is the inner,
Hmm.
which is the connection. The other is the outer, which creates the duality and the references as to the choices, I guess,
Yeah. The
right? And the
choices.
distractions of
Ooh.
it. How did you resolve that when you were younger and moving into that personal relationship space?
Yeah. Um, well, my parents got married young, and when I was going to that Catholic church, my dad was still around. But then my mom, who was adopted, um, she got involved in drugs and alcohol, and kind of took the wrong turn in the marriage, which impacted my father to move out and file for divorce. And I still remember the day seeing him pack his bags in my parents' master bedroom. And I'm like, where are you going? Because it didn't look like it was just an overnight stay.
Right.
I was 9 years old.
Oh,
And then that's when he,
confused. And,
hmm?
and just that kind of, just seeing that as a
I can,
child, that had
yeah,
to have been extremely confusing and very distraught.
it was. I still remember standing in the hallway, and I can still remember the sun shining in the master bedroom and him standing by that tall chest, the men's armoire or whatever that was big
Hmm.
in the 70s, right?
Right.
It also had all the coins, the change from his pockets that I used to sneak and steal from him to go to the candy store.
Oh, we never did that as kids. Come on. Right.
Oh gosh. But yeah, he told me he was leaving, and I grabbed a bag of potato chips and a bottle of soda and went to we lived near a golf course, and I went to the 18th hole and just sat and cried and started to talk to whatever I thought, whoever or whatever would listen. And
Hmm.
I was still searching for that higher power that I knew at the Catholic Church there was something there. And I just kept asking, why can't our family be normal? And then later on in life, I was married. My first husband was an alcoholic, domestic abuse, and I had a rough life there. And I always thought, growing up as a Catholic, if you get married, you get married for better or for worse. And it was for the worse. And I was married. So I stuck in there as long as I could, even though I was battered physically and mentally, and I bailed him out of jail. I hid everything. I lived a life of secret at home that nobody knew about. Nobody knew about.
Hmm.
Not work,
I
not
can
my
relate.
dad.
I
Yep.
did similar in
Yeah.
my first marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. And I showed up to work every day with a smile on my face and did what I had to do. But I'll tell you what, Zen, at that point, I started getting a little bit more grittier with my conversations with this higher power, which I, at this point, know has got to be God, because everybody talks about him.
Hmm.
And, why,
All
why,
kinds of
why?
names, but it's just this
Yeah, the
infinite
higher power.
intelligence that you have access to.
Yeah. And my question was, am I allowed to get out of this relationship, because I'm going to get killed is what's going to happen. And the attempts were there, the police were there, all of that stuff. And I talked to a pastor at a local church, and he's like, yeah, you get out is what you do. You save your life. So
It's an act of self-love,
yes.
right?
Yeah. So at that point, I feel like God answered my prayer because I got out and I was rescued, but I still wasn't quite 100% in full relationship with the higher power. And I always wished, and you could call it prayed, because, I think when we talk to someone, it's a form of prayer, right?
Totally
It,
agree. Yeah.
yeah. And through the years, I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to have a normal family, and I just wanted life to be easier than what it had been with what I was going through. And then I met my husband, who actually was a friend of mine with where I worked. And he was previously married. I was previously married. And we started to date, and he was a faithful Christian, a born again Christian. And the only way he would date me would be if I believed in God and had a relationship with a higher power, made the right decisions, right?
Hmm.
And I agreed. And I still remember the day sitting on a patio of his apartment complex where he lived, and just asking God, if this is the man that I've been praying for, that's going to give me what you're going to give us, a family, I need to know. And he let me know that this was the man. And we spoke to our pastor at the church we were going to, and we got married right away. Zen, we got married
Let me
within,
ask you, you said he let you know, or
yeah.
God let you know. How was that? What was that like? Was it a sensation,
Mhm.
a voice within? Because that appears, it's like our learning, right? We're auditory,
Yeah,
kinesthetic, or um, visual, and communication
yeah.
is tailored to how we receive it.
It was all of that. I felt it. I just felt it, just
Mm.
sitting in that moment. Um, because I'll tell you, I remember when I got married to my first husband, who was the alcoholic, but I didn't know it. something was telling me in that moment walking down the aisle that this isn't right.
Right.
But I was already in the gown with my dad in my arm. I'm not going to run away, which I should have because they made a movie about it. That could have been me, the runaway bride.
Right.
I
Right.
cried because I'm like, something that doesn't feel right. The feeling wasn't there.
Now
So,
that's
yeah,
a really perfect point, right? The sensation,
yeah,
right? And we can't think our way through a system built on vibration, right? We've got to sense our way through it. And
yeah.
quantum physics now is revealing that, yeah, everything's vibration. It's just how we sense it. The three brain philosophy, the indigenous, right? The gut, the heart, and the head, and processing in that order now. And there's neurosensors to back it up. We tend to start here, like you did, walking down the aisle, right? You got the gut feeling, but you went up here and
Yeah.
you pushed that down into your body,
Yep.
and the response you got was not a pleasant one in how your life played out for a little bit.
For a little bit, but it was the longest little bit of my life. Let's just say
Oh,
that.
sure, sure. And you know, I can relate on the flip side, I can relate to that. And I can also relate to that special synchronicity of how your connection was revealed. You know, at 59, I'd been divorced for 30 years, and I met this woman, walked in front of me. My heart literally flipped in my chest.
Mhm.
There was some setup for her. I had dreamed about hugging a woman and merging with
Oh,
her as one. And so that got my attention. And it was at her Kundalini yoga teacher training graduation. I had no idea who it was, but
okay.
it was a setup for both of us. And then um, a few days later, or a week or so later, you know, there was this recognition from both of us, and I was still questioning. And as I walked out into the backyard of the house I was living in, and I made that kind of question prayer, you know, is this
Yeah.
real or am I imagining it? And instantly there's a shooting star.
Yeah. I get it.
It's like, how did that happen? Right? That synchronicity is part of the level of awareness that we get to when we're connected. At least
Oh,
that's what
yeah.
it seems like to me. How does that reflect for
Oh
you?
my gosh. Spot on. And I remember my best friend after that first marriage, she's helped me through some of the abusive situations, and she was married. And I asked her about that because she seemed very happily married, and she said she just knew she had that feeling. I'm like, how come you got it right? She goes, because she knew. She goes, you'll know. This is before I married my second husband now of 30 years, but I remember her saying, you just will get that feeling and you will know. And I'm like, what's the feeling you're talking about? I had no clue
Well,
until,
it's that be still and know that I am.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And wow.
Yeah,
And what's funny is we're nearing 30 years of marriage and it went by just like that. 'Cause
congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah.
But that first marriage, 18 months felt like a lifetime of hell.
Mhm.
Wow. This is good stuff, Zen. Thank you for allowing us to open up like this. It makes sense. It
Well,
all
part
makes
of being
sense.
able to share truth is speaking our own truths in a
Mhm.
vulnerable way and understanding that we're in you know, psychologically safe and intellectually humble environment to do so. You know,
Mhm.
and really all we truly want in life is to love and be loved. That's the
Yeah.
core of every human being that we
Mm.
tend to cover up with all kinds of layers of crap.
Yeah.
Don't feel we're worthy to
Oh
begin with.
boy. Mm. Oh man, you're talking to me. I hear ya.
We all feel that way. I think it's part of the process, right, of getting to know self, our connection, both the little s and the big S. Because the big S is where we acquiesce to, okay, I'm listening. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Good stuff.
So in that listening, how did it develop? What kind of experiences were you able to not just garner, to really integrate and understand that you might be able to share that might have some other reflective capacity in our audience?
some other experiences on my life journey. Is that what you're?
During that time, because there's layers of that life journey too, right?
Oh
That
yeah.
are, some are cursory and others are really deep, and we don't often share because they really sound so weird when they come out of our mouths.
Oh yeah. Well, um, I could go into the fact that uh, my parents, being that they were divorced, couldn't afford to put me through college. And back in the 80s, that was a big deal for everybody that was in high school. You were already talking your sophomore, junior year, what school you're going to go to and who you're going to be,
Mhm.
which it baffled my mind back then. I'm like, how can you really know who you're going to be? We're just still in school. And it's
Right.
still that way today. But I was the junior, senior, the schoolgirl who lived with her dad. That he won custody of me after my mom abandoned me with that drug style life of hers. Um, I was the girl that waited in the hot lunch line to get a special color ticket because my lunches were free. So I was living a life of trying to hide a lot of what to me just wasn't the norm, quote unquote.
Mhm.
And so senior year came and I wasn't going to school, but everybody was asking, were you going to school? And if you weren't going to school, it seemed to me there were only like 2 or 3 of us that weren't going to college because we couldn't afford it. And my dad just told me, just bust your butt, work hard, and you'll pass some of those college grads up in your career. And he was right. He was darn tootin' right.
Mhm.
Because I'll tell you today, I know there are kids that are blessed and their parents are wealthy and they go to college, some of the greatest named universities in this country, and then they just quit their job and don't want to work. And I'm like, whoa.
Right.
I'm like, meanwhile, there's some of us kids that would have loved that opportunity.
And there's a huge problem in the workspace and today,
Yeah.
qualified people
Yes.
first, and then there's this whole generation that you mentioned that just seem like they don't want to
I
work.
know.
Now, looking at that from an older perspective or a different programmed belief system, we see that as being, oh, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. Instead of, well, why is this happening?
Yeah.
What can we do to support the obvious change that's happening? Because what we're doing isn't working. It's kind of like Einstein saying that, you can't solve the problems with the same thinking that created them. Have
Yes.
we got that memo yet?
Right. Yeah, you're right on. I think about that today because years ago, you couldn't even get interviewed for a job unless you had that college education on
Mhm.
the bottom of your resume. I had to fight through that, and I had to fight through that to get promoted as a woman in an all male industry without the college education. And fire in the belly
Yeah.
will outweigh a lot of college educations. Now, you need a degree to be an engineer, you need a degree to be a physician. I get that, but um, you know, business courses, sales, marketing. I'm not so sure you have to have the degree because a lot of times creativity just comes from within, not from
Yeah,
a
and it's
college
common
university.
sense at that level when
Hmm.
you begin to ask the questions as to how and what, and the
Yeah,
why is already there because you got the fire in the belly. You want
that's
to
right.
become.
And some of the best creators and the best athletes. I mean, I think of in Milwaukee, the Bucks. We've got the Greek Freak.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
His
remember
story is,
Oscar Robinson.
oh my God, his story is incredible.
Yeah.
He grew up poor, and his 2 brothers with him, Giannis, wanted to play basketball like big time. And they were so poor, they had to share the same pair of basketball shoes and practice different hours with that same pair of basketball shoes because
Mm.
that's all they could afford. And here he is doing well in his life. And you know what he drives today around Milwaukee, Wisconsin? Because he lives here, obviously, in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
An old Suburban, like a 2015. This man has a ton of money today, and he lives frugal. And
That
and
sounds like Kurt Warner, the quarterback for the Cardinals. I know him personally, and the
oh
guy's got,
wow,
7 kids, started as a grocery sacker. And when I was talking with him out in front of the training facility one day, he was driving a Ford Escort station wagon,
the escort.
right? So these people are so humble,
Yeah,
and that
yeah, yeah.
what we generally, we think that money and power is going to solve everything. Right.
Right.
When usually what it does is compound the problems we already had.
Oh wow, that's a good one. You need to quotate that one from beginning to end. Yes. And I think of Giannis, he didn't go to any big university. They couldn't afford it. He
Mhm.
worked his way up. And that's where I like where you were going earlier. Like maybe our universities aren't offering all that really is within us as individuals.
Right. Now that's the difference. I mentioned my wife Luba, and she's from St. Petersburg, Russia, and went through all their educational system from 5 years old, was given the choice of being a pianist or a gymnast, and she
Yeah.
chose piano. So what they did, which is something we don't do in America, was assess the child, their abilities, their aptitude, their attitude,
Yeah.
and the skill set that was available to develop.
Wow.
Years later, I taught high school here for a number of years. And then after I taught in multiple locations and different levels of socioeconomic environments, I wrote a business plan for a model school that started with that early assessment. It was a holistic educational program that we've never had yet. Australia began, I'm not sure where they're at with it now, but it addresses the mind, body, spirit, and I included planet along with it because it's all interconnected. Unless we address all of those elements, we're missing something and we're going to fall short of our goals,
Yeah. Yep.
which is a better world.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Hopefully one that's in harmony with itself, right? Now, harmony,
Yeah.
you hear that word, oftentimes people think, oh, that's just utopia, it's a bliss. No, harmony is not about that, right? The process is chaos to order. Well, what's order? Order is the harmony of all the different patterns in the chaos that we have to recognize, get comfortable with, allow to be, because they're not going to change. It's only our perception and our response to them that does,
Mhm.
right? It's either resistance, inclusion, or even being able to integrate and make whole in that because we utilize all of the different aspects of diversity,
Yeah. Diversity. Yes.
right? So it's not just in the workplace that diversity,
That's
that's
right.
that inner diversity that we have to get comfortable with because it's there. We can't
Yep.
deny any of it.
Yeah. That
Now,
is
how did
so
you
right
take
on.
that? Thank you. Um, these kinds of conversations that being able to share at these kinds of levels bring stuff out of me that I've never been able to speak either, just like you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so wonderful to be able to have that. Thank you.
It is. Thank you. I mean, I think of that little girl that waited in line for those special colored hot lunch tickets that were paid for by the district and how I don't know, humbling it was, but at the same time I wanted to hide.
Mm.
If I could tell her today, you just have no idea who you're going to become one day. So
Well,
just
you
grab the
got underneath, you got out from underneath the bushel basket.
yeah. I would tell her grab that ticket and just know you're on your way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, speaking of being on your way, you really developed this notion of how you connected with life and others and turned it into something to really help others in the process. How
Mhm.
did that come about? And I'm speaking about helping people find a place in the work world and
Yeah.
also to help those who have an idea that just needs some help in order to achieve it financially.
Mhm.
How did that come about, and what was the process for you?
Yes. Um, it was a 30-year corporate career process. And in my first 10 years, if I would have known that I would be where I am today, I mean, I wouldn't have never thought that. I really believe the journey of my 30 years, there was that higher power that had a plan of what I was doing. And I just
I
didn't
think
know
there
the,
always is. We just don't
yeah,
pay
right?
attention to it.
Yeah,
Right?
right, exactly. Uh, and I'm going to get into that, but all the hurts and the challenges I went through in those 30 years brought me to where I am today, which is creating solutions for others, as in women and minorities, that are experiencing the same today as I did or have in the past. And I want to help lift them up. And I'll explain what that all means. But that first career job of 18 years in the 90s, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to be promoted, but I didn't have that college education. And then I was a woman. And
Hmm.
they were very blunt, very straightforward, because you could be back then in the late 80s, early 90s. Nope, Deb, we don't promote women and you don't have a college education. That was it. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's right, because I'm doing the job as the white male peers are, if not more. I don't understand why. And I think you need to reconsider. And I stayed positively persistent with it. And they agreed to promote me finally, but they put me on a 6-month probationary period to see, quote unquote, how Deb would do.
Mm.
And,
Such a white male patriarchal
yeah,
purgatory.
it was a purgatory, but
Right?
I took it as opportunity, because in my mind, Zen, I knew I didn't have the college education. So my mission was take the promotion, take the probationary period, pardon my French, kick ass and show them that you can do it. And when I did show them I could do it, they promoted me finally to that position. And I wanted that at the top of my resume, because I didn't have that stinking university degree at the bottom of my resume. And
Right.
those freaking pieces of paper called a resume, they got to just be thrown out the window, in my opinion. Enough is enough.
Well,
Okay.
and
I'm going
now it's all a digital, you know,
to.
system, and so there's the reading of it and the look for keywords and things like that. And if you're not
Exactly.
really
Yes.
astute or have somebody,
Or an AI make it for you.
yeah, then which with ChatGPT, man, that thing is amazing. It's like my new best friend.
I know that's another day topic we should turn back
Right.
on. But they promoted me without the pay, though, because they're like, you don't have the education. We'll give you a slight increase, and we'll just go from there and see how it goes. Eventually, I left because I wasn't making any more money. They just capped me out and wouldn't give me
Right.
more
You hit the
money.
glass ceiling,
I hit
unfortunately.
the glass ceiling. And the reason why I know the pay wasn't the same, my husband of today, we worked at the same company. And
Mm.
so he knows my journey. Um, he sees the disparate treatment throughout my career, which I'll move forward to. The following employers, I worked for many banks as a business banker and an SBA lender. And you and your audience might imagine, when you walk into a bank, well, today they're pretty dead because things are all electronic, but years
Mhm.
prior, when you walked in, typically your business banking team were white men. I mean, that's just who supported small businesses.
Yep.
And little by little, women were accepted. And I was on many teams where I was the only female on the team, because, quote unquote, the bank had to meet diversity and make sure they're hiring women for fair and equal treatment, so
Mhm.
they could check off that box on a piece of paper. Well, that's all fine and dandy, checking off a box on a piece of paper, but who's tracking how they're being treated internally inside the organization is a different story.
Right.
And I'm not here to bash, because that's not who I am, but I am here to share with you. There
There
was
are
a
certain realities that we just, and I don't hear you bashing. I hear
yeah,
you, just saying, okay, this is the way it was,
right,
and I
right.
understand that. I had the opportunity to work for a nonprofit lending organization that was serving women and minority-owned businesses just after the turn of the century. I
Yeah.
taught business plan writing classes to them, and I
Wow.
also helped facilitate the accelerated loan process. So if they've
Okay.
been in business for a few years, they had the financials, and we were able to bump them up.
Hmm.
Uh, but what was and the executive director of the organization was a Black woman, and
Okay.
so we were doing some tremendous work in the community. And then I don't know why, probably some fear of losing funding, right?
Yeah.
I found out that we had um, were reporting statistics that weren't correct. And
Mm. Mm.
I ended up leaving because of it. And then a few years later, I ran into the local, he's a, I think he's regional or state director for the SBA. And
Okay.
we'd known each other for years, had met through this program. And he said, then it was just a shame because he was part of the team that had to close them down. They were reporting 75% completion rates only after 4 weeks of a 10-week class.
Mm.
And I knew
Whoa.
from teaching it, there were, 35 people to begin with, and there'd be 7 or 8 at the completion. Still, we were able to serve the community, but because of that um, gap in reporting, they closed the doors. And the
Yeah.
feds came in and said, no, you can't do this. And
Hmm.
I don't know what would have happened had the reports been correct,
Hmm.
right? Truthful. I'm sure that if they were, knowing what I do now, that there would have been some help offered to help correct things and figure out, okay, where's our gap here and how can we
Yeah.
fill it so that we can still continue to serve the community. Unfortunately, it was my time and it was bye-bye.
Yeah.
So, and those kinds of things happen, like with you, right? You go through it, you come in, you recognize something, you help elevate it, and it's like, okay, I'm done. And God, the universe, infinite intelligence, whatever, has that synchronistic event that moves you on.
Right. And that synchronicity event is very common in most women and perhaps minorities that are treated disparately in the workforce. They quit because that's what the corporations and the upper management want you to do. Because
Mhm.
once you quit, you have no case. And I know that because my last stop, I was blessed enough, I don't know, that higher power sent somebody into a community of mine who happened to been a very popular workplace attorney in New York representing women.
Mm,
Honestly, I would have
magic.
thank
We think
you.
it's magic, but it really isn't. It comes out of where your attention, intention, and interaction are.
Yeah. It's part of that plan above me, that why I'm where I'm at today. He just didn't come into my life out of nowhere.
Mhm.
Somebody sent him. I don't know who, but he was the reason
Whether
that,
above or below, it really doesn't matter. It's all
yeah,
about the flow.
flow. He'd agree with us if he was sitting here in the
Mm.
conversation. The last stop was more of the same, if not worse, because previous shops and the last one, not only did I witness disparate treatment internally, but externally with some white front end lenders cherry picking who they wanted to take business loan applications from. And
Mhm.
they would have their own personal biases, and they did not follow the rules. And I knew many, many, and I still do today, of African Americans, women that try to call for loans and they don't get calls back. And I witnessed it and I saw it.
Yeah.
And when you try to positively create awareness in the company that you're working for, not in a bad way, but in a way to create unity and diversity, you put a target on your back. And the culture of silence in the corporate place spreads like wildfire. The men know about what's going on, the women know, but nobody will say anything because it'll put targets on their back.
Well,
So,
so how collectively, right?
yeah,
This situation that we all acknowledge to be, right? So how do we move beyond that? How do we transcend those, for lack of a better, kerfuffles,
yeah,
right? I love that term because
I,
it's
I
kind
like
of,
it
it's
too.
descript but non-descript. It's the much less energy, right?
That's
It's
right.
acknowledging, maybe even a bit humorously.
Yeah.
And laughter always being the best medicine, right? To get
Mhm.
us through from one thing to another. Sometimes we laugh at our own silly humanness, and sometimes we laugh at how ridiculous things are around us and what we have to do to get through them,
Yeah. Hmm.
like you, right?
Hmm.
Perfect example. So how did you deal with this last situation and move into a more effective position for
Yeah.
serving others?
Um, this at this round, I hired counsel that represented me and really had to reel me in not to quit until they let me go,
Mm-hmm.
because now we have a case and it's ongoing. It'll probably be ongoing for years because I contacted the Equal Credit Opportunity Complaints Department. You file it there, and discrimination and disparate treatment. They're only running about 3 years behind on cases right now. That's all, 3 years. So it's quite evident. It's an
Less,
epidemic as much as the pandemic was.
yeah,
It's
and it
everywhere.
has no priority.
No priority is correct. Hmm.
Now, would a leadership change? What do you think if we, as an American public,
Hmm.
actually learned how to work together and organize and say, hey, wait a minute, all this stuff is just not right? Would it create too much chaos in the shift from one way to another? Would there be blowback? Would there be a civil war as
Yeah.
a result? Because when that energy is released, it's going to have a lot of anger with it. How
Mhm.
do we not necessarily divert it, but how do we restructure that anger in positive ways so that we get better results with it?
I don't know what the answer is, because you can put in all the regulations that our government does on banking institutions to ensure internally and externally there's fair and equal treatment of all, but it's not happening. They can just keep checking those boxes, and it appears fine. We don't have enough funds to hire people to audit and check the front line. The corporate greed with some of these companies, the bank owners and their management, they know that there is um, incorrect treatment of borrowers
Right.
on the front line, but numbers mean more to them
Well, it's
than
profit over people and planet.
thank you. You said it precisely.
Now,
Yep.
how do we flip that to people and planet over profit? Right.
That's why I'm here, to be a voice of reason, and only my one voice can speak. And here's the deal: many can't speak when they're in corporate, and until more of us get out of corporate and feel comfortable enough that, because they always say, oh my gosh, if you file a claim you'll never get a job again, because that'll, nobody will ever want to hire you because they think you're a whistleblower. I'm like,
Mhm.
please,
We
I'm
need
gonna
more of those, honestly.
yes, we need more of us raising our voices. And thank God for the podcasts, because we're listening to it.
I
Music
would
station.
even say thank God for the pandemic, because it gave the chance for the workplace to go remote, for people
Yes.
to like, okay, let's reassess where I'm at. Do I really like working in that office? How does it feel?
Yeah.
Where do I want to go? And do I have a skill set or an idea or a dream that I want to achieve that I can now focus more on me?
Mhm.
And not that that's a disrespectful or inappropriate
Yeah.
focus, right? Because
Mhm.
if you aren't whole, if we don't love ourselves, how can we possibly fully love someone else,
That's
let
right.
alone learn how to get along,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So in this process, which it is, there's this evolutionary path that we're taking as humanity. If we
Mhm.
look back and kind of take a bigger picture view, if you will,
Mhm.
historically and where we're at, we have a tremendous opportunity now for those various shifts to begin happening. And it
Yes.
seems as they are, even though the momentum is kind of slow to build. Do
Yeah.
you see that as well, or am I just
No, I do
imagining
see it.
things?
In fact, I often quote with some other women that have gone through this and friends of mine that are African American. We feel the earth moving a bit. We can
Hmm.
feel the earth moving a bit. It does seem like it's taking forever to get there, but it's going to come. And I'm going to do all I can to help, because we also have this huge baby boomer shift. We call it the silver tsunami.
Hmm.
11,000 baby boomers are retiring per day starting now for the next 5 years. It's the greatest wealth transfer ever on this planet with these baby boomers, because we're living longer.
Mhm.
And in those 11,000 Zen are small business owners that have been operating legacy businesses that are essential needs businesses that will never go away. AI can't take away essential needs. We need our
Right,
air conditionings fixed. We need
right.
heating. We need our autos repaired. There's a lot that are very good essential needs businesses that are available for sale. And I'm going to do everything I can to help women and minorities. And of course, I practice unity and diversity. I will help white men because I will, but they are the number one applicant right now, acquiring these businesses with bank financing backed by the SBA, because they have climbed that corporate ladder, were paid more than the rest of us. So they have more cash liquidity and
Right.
assets to
Less
acquire
risk.
these businesses. Yes. So I'm going to be the voice of reason to teach people, everyone, so it's fair and equal opportunities for everyone, not just the same old story, the white
Right.
male climbing up the ladder. This is such a great time. I mean, there's a lot of people losing their jobs, millennials and Gen Xers, because of the AI beast. You can look at it as a beast or as a friend. You're going to have to be friends, because if you don't know AI, you're not going to get a job. It's just the way
Again,
it
back
goes.
to the photonic nature we have, right?
Yes.
Nothing is good or bad. It's how we think it so. And
You
that's a
got it.
choice we can make in any given moment. They're not
Yes.
real easy choices
Mhm.
sometimes, because we feel pushed and pulled energetically towards certain things.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find your center in that. However, there's a great Eastern Christian mystic. His name's Aurobindo Ghosh, Sri
Uh-huh.
Aurobindo Ghosh. And he said at one point, he passed on in the 50s, I think. But he said, in order to find your center, you must step into the middle of chaos.
Mm. Mm.
Now, how willing are we individually to do that?
Wow.
That's a
I like
vulnerable place to be.
it.
And that
Is.
seems to be a superpower now, is
Yeah. That.
vulnerability, especially for men.
Yes. Yeah.
Because women have been vulnerable the whole time. You guys have been
Yeah.
screaming for acknowledgement, attention, to be treated fairly, to be loved like you ought to be.
Right? Hey, do you remember Rosie the Riveter, the icon
Oh,
from?
yeah, yeah. Right.
Yes, I'm wearing her headband today just for
Yeah.
that reason. But yes, it was happening 1858, I think it was. Yes, and it's still here today. Um, but I love that comment you just made. Standing in the middle of chaos is where opportunity could be,
Mm,
because all of these Gen Xers and millennials, they're in a bit of a spin, the ones that have been losing their jobs, massive layoffs, the Facebook and all of the big tech companies laying everybody off. Well, they've got some good skills. It's not like they're the younger generations after them. And then there's all these baby boomers with all these businesses that really don't have a website or technology, but they're darn solid companies that have profits because they're essential needs companies. Wow, what if we put some of the smarts of the technology with the essential businesses and met in the middle? And we can keep our small businesses growing
Right.
and alive and thriving. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Well, and
And
I think that's a perfect way to look at it. And it also leads to understanding the essential needs of teams, right?
Mhm.
There's certain archetypal representations, usually, 5 to 7 different types that are necessary for a cohesive team. Now, because we have the ability to often shift on a dime, right? I call it being a mini Atma. Um, Small business owners, especially solopreneurs,
Yeah,
have to wear all of those hats. Well,
right.
how do you, reach out and find or ask for or pray for those who fill those gaps and are compatible, have complementary work skills and skill sets and attitudes?
Mhm.
How do you bring those together? How do you find them in the first place?
Yeah,
And how do you recognize that you need them?
right. Yeah. Um, I call change of business ownership finance transactions like they're puzzle pieces. You
Mhm.
got to find those pieces, then. You got to find the right buyer pieces that are going to connect with the right seller, and they're all different. But boy, when they do connect, it's fascinating. And I love the stories of the transitioning owners that go in and take over, but they still keep a relationship with the original founder who's basically retired and enjoying life because he sold his business. And they keep the relationship with certain anniversary dates, bringing back the founder.
Sure,
And that's
sure.
unity. That's,
Well, I'm struck by, not hard, it's a soft strike, right? And it's not the third. So
yeah.
there's this notion of, we're all in relationships on the ocean of emotion,
Wow.
seeking safe harbor together.
Mm,
And so it's those individuals that you're talking about that are those bridge factors.
those would be good lyrics for a song, I just want to say.
Take it and run with it, right?
I'm
Um,
like, dang, that'd be a good song
Speaking
lyric.
of running with it, we're kind of hedging the
Yeah,
end,
I
hedging
hear
the
you.
edge, if you will, like we always do, folks like
Mhm.
us. Um, in parting, what kind of advice could you give for a daily practice or notion or mind flow for others that are in similar situations?
Yeah. Well, my message would be for those of you that are stuck in corporate and maybe being treated disparately, don't quit. Get your plan B, your plan C in motion. Yes, decades ago in the 90s, it was frowned upon if you were working part time or something on the side if you had a full time job. Those days are over because decades forward, now corporate isn't as loyal to us as they used to be.
Hmm.
So we have to take care of ourselves first, always having that plan B or C. Don't quit. Get advice, get the right help to get you into the next um, role that you're going to be, whether it's starting up a business or acquiring one that's established or your next corporate job where there are good companies out there that will take care of you. But that's the message, Zen, because I can't tell you how many times I quit and I just would cry and scream to the higher power above, like, why me? Why me? What's the message here? I used to always say that. What are you trying to
I
tell
finally got
me?
why not?
Yeah, well,
It's like,
here it is. The why not is right here, right now, what I'm doing. He knew what he was doing with me, even though I struggled against it with that God grit and grace behind me. I'm
mhm,
like, why? He was teaching me. He was teaching me unity and diversity, and that one day in my future, I would be a voice of reason trying to spread the message
right.
that we can get better and we shouldn't have to quit. We
And as
should
we are
just,
told, God is no respecter of person, right?
yeah,
We're all the same.
exactly. Yeah,
Super. I'm sorry, I kind of cut you off there with,
that's okay. I'm just overjoyed, and what you get me going with thoughts, and I'm just grateful to share them with your
yeah, I'm quite the
listeners.
Thetan, thank you. And that wasn't spoken with a lisp.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to listen back to this episode. I'm going to write down some of your phrases because
Oh, cool. I would so enjoy it. And
do
thank you
you
so
do
much
you write
for
music,
being who
man?
you are.
Oh,
No, I don't yet.
you
Yeah,
should.
future self.
There you
Okay.
go. There you
All
go.
right.
Thank you, though, Zen. You are wonderful to collaborate with. I appreciated this time.
It's my pleasure, and it's a gift from you and from me as well, and just coming together.
Yeah.
So I honor that. And namaste and in-law catch. And thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I'll see you next time.